Go.
So yeah, I don't have a visual for this here, but we have a slide that talks about our legal focus, and we are exclusively focused on the legal services market. We're built to sponsors. We do a lot with ARC, speak at their BI conference. I speak at SharePoint Symposium, LMA, ALM. We do roadshows, webinars. I was lucky enough to get nominated for Vendor Thought Leader of the Year last year. And then, of course, we see a lot of you folks at all the events, BuiltCon, Legal Tech, etc. I'll turn it over to Jeff so he can introduce himself and BA Insight.
Sure, and I see a comment that we need to speak up, please, so I'll try to be loud. BA Insight is a product company focused on components that add on to SharePoint, specifically around portals such as legal research portals, intranets, and search implementations. And we have been delighted to be a partner with Acquire and to bring this content to people all through this roadshow. I personally am a close Microsoft partner, both by having worked at Microsoft, where I was responsible for SharePoint Search, and in the current role as a partner and vendor. So what we are planning to talk about today is what's new in SharePoint 2016, walk through the user experience and hybrid experiences, talk about compliance and reporting, and then give you some feedback about what you might need to do to prepare. And it looks like we have visuals back. We have a poll around the version of SharePoint that people are running now that maybe we can also bring up while we get to the right slide.
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind letting us know here what version of SharePoint that you're currently using. If you're using anything older than 2003, please email me after the webinar, because I'd like to meet you. But believe it or not, there's still some out there. And we asked this question during the roadshows, and this is a pretty typical distribution. It looks like most folks are on 2010 or on 2013. This presentation should be timely in terms of when the product, the SharePoint 26 product, is due to be released. I'll advance it to the next slide here. The initial preview was released in August, and a lot of the new features that Microsoft had talked about were really not there. They released a second beta about 2 weeks ago. We've just gotten that stood up and gotten a chance to hammer on a few new things. There's the new mobile preview that's available in the second beta, and some additional items that weren't there in the first. One thing that was there in the first that was very important, even if you're not responsible for installing SharePoint, there's a new concept called min roles, which is the new way that SharePoint gets deployed, and it is a game changer, and we'll talk about why. So the release to market is scheduled for second quarter of 2016 calendar year. Microsoft is running slightly ahead of schedule, which does happen from time to time, and I would expect that RTM to be sometime in early second quarter, possibly even late first quarter. So if you're thinking about making a move based on that poll that we just did, a lot of folks are still on 2010. We're going to talk about what the upgrade and migration options, what those look like if you're holding out for 2016, and why Normally we recommend that firms wait until SP1 has been released for a Microsoft product before they migrate. There's some reasons why that may not be as necessary as in the past. So here are a few questions that law firms typically have. If any of you were lucky enough to attend Ignite in Chicago this year, that's Microsoft's kind of new all-in-one conference. Ignite, they talked a lot about cloud-inspired architecture. And for law firms, cloud can be sometimes a four-letter word. And cloud-inspired architecture, how that fits into the on-prem version of SharePoint Server, which we're talking about, we're going to explain that and what that means. Microsoft made a big splash at ILTACON Nashville 2 years ago about Matter Center, and a lot of folks have questions. We're going to talk about if and why you should care about Matter Center, new compliance features in SharePoint 2016. Jeff's going to walk through and show you what some of those are, including how they've incorporated the new Equivio product that they got by way of acquisition back in January. And we'll also talk about deployment scenarios and what might make sense in your particular situation. Okay, so I alluded to the fact that cloud-inspired architecture, what that means and why you may not have to wait until SP1 to migrate to 2016. And that really has to do with how 2016 came into being. So SharePoint 2016 is actually a snapshot of SharePoint Online. So what Microsoft did as a Genesis block for SharePoint Server 2016 is they took a snapshot of the SharePoint Online code base and then backported all the features that aren't there, like Performance Point is a good example. That's very, very different than how things have happened in the past. So Microsoft has been providing hosted SharePoint services for a number of years. And this is before Office 365, before BPOS. If you were an enterprise customer, Microsoft had hosting options for you. And how new features got released into the product in the past is they would modify the on-prem code base. Those features would get vetted out, tested, incorporated, and released, and then they would make their way into whatever version of SharePoint that Microsoft was hosting. With SharePoint 2016, the opposite. That workflow got turned on its head. So they took a snapshot, and that was the Genesis block. Any new features that come through the SharePoint product are going to happen online first. That's a little different than how things have happened in the past. If you want to get a feel for where things are headed with the on-prem product, a good place to go is roadmap.office.com, which you can see that URL at that top light gray bar. That's essentially a backlog of all the new features that are both planned, being tested, implemented, or canceled. It's a very user-friendly site, so you can get in there and get a feel for what features are coming and when. When I mentioned that you might not have to wait till SP1 to deploy SharePoint 2016, the reason is, when the RTM version of most Microsoft products are released, there are a lot of bugs and a lot of missing features. Because the starting point for SharePoint 2016 is in the cloud, a lot of those things have already been worked out because users have already kicked the tires, so to speak. I think that we'll need to see, what that RTM release looks like. But if I had a hunch now, I would say that 2016 SP0 is much more of an option than prior releases of the product. Microsoft also is going through a very rapid release cycle in SharePoint Online, and features are getting released every month. You can expect a similar cadence on-prem if Microsoft is true to their word. They've really beat this drum hard, so my guess is that they'll live up to that commitment. So things are very different in 2016, kind of with how it came about and how releases are going to be incorporated, and that's really where that cloud-inspired architecture comes from. And there's also some hybrid hooks that that Jeff's going to talk about. Okay, so let's talk about one of the things that we've been able to kind of kick the tires on in the beta releases of the product. So Microsoft, even if you're not responsible for SharePoint, this is a very relevant topic for you. So Microsoft has changed how administrators go about installing the product. In the past, when you deployed SharePoint, you always need multiple servers in any sort of a production environment, and the process was you would lay down the SharePoint, the entire SharePoint installation bits or binaries, and then you light up the features that you would need for that particular server. The problem with that approach is that there was really no compliance checks or best practices that the administrators were forced to follow. So Microsoft created this new concept called a min role. And a min role is a use case for the server that's being deployed that the administrators designate at install time. And what that means to end users or CIOs or whatever your role is, that even if it doesn't actually touch SharePoint, is that there are now tools to ensure that your SharePoint farm is healthy. And anyone who's deployed SharePoint on-prem has probably run into performance issues at one time or another, and this new concept of min role will help mitigate some of those challenges. So when your administrators are deploying SharePoint on-prem, they choose between 5 roles, at least as of today. The first 4, web front-end, app server, cache, and search, those are designated min roles, and if an administrator deploys a web front end and then later down the road lights up some other search-related services or third-party apps, there's a compliance checker, which we're going to show you on the next slide, that will highlight that fact and let people know that there may be an issue, that a server may be used in an unanticipated way, and maybe some configuration changes need to be made. What's now called the SharePoint Health Analyzer is the mechanism through which Microsoft provides visibility into servers that are no longer compliant with the min role that was designated for them. So now your SharePoint administrators have tools. You know, when performance problems would manifest themselves in the past in an on-prem version, it was really difficult to really track down what the challenge was. This health analyzer, I don't really like the name because it doesn't actually tell you health. It's really kind of a compliance analyzer, and it tells you if the servers that you have deployed in your SharePoint environment are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It doesn't tell you if you have ample disk space or you have the right SQL settings or the IIS settings. At AcroWire, we have a product that we offer called SharePoint MD that I'll tell you about on the last slide that really is a better indicator of health. But this is a very useful tool nonetheless, and it will ultimately end up in a better user experience and have users less frustrated. So some boundaries and limits that have changed, depending on how heavily you use SharePoint, you may have run into thresholds that either can't be exceeded or your administrators have to go set the settings on. A very common one is list view threshold. So if you have more than 5,000 items in a SharePoint list and you try and create a view that returns more than 5,000 of those underlying list items, you ran into issues. There were some dials that an administrator could play with behind the scenes to adjust that. But at the end of the day, 5,000 records is really, that's not a lot of data, and Microsoft has recognized that and increased the threshold. They haven't told us what number they're increasing it to yet. Jeff is in the TAP meetings and may have some additional insight. The last published thing I saw was it's going to be greater than 5,000. but we don't have the number yet. Some other interesting improvements to boundaries and limits is around max file size. In the past, that's been 2 gigs. It's now been moved to 10. So, if you've got videos or other multimedia, CAD drawings, what have you, that you wanted to store in SharePoint in the past, but file size got in the way, some of the new boundaries and limits in SharePoint 2016 will alleviate that pain. Excel services. So I don't know if anybody on the phone has heard, but there was a little bit of hysteria in the SharePoint world a few months back when it was announced that Excel services was being removed from SharePoint. It's not actually being removed from SharePoint. Microsoft has just essentially repackaged or re-skewed it so that it's licensed differently. So everybody will still have access to Excel services, but it has to be licensed through the online or the Office Online server. And again, I think the messaging around that was left a little to be desired. Excel services is not going away. It's just being relicensed. Something else that has changed and caused a lot of confusion and that we want to kind of clear up to the best of our ability is Project Server is now included in SharePoint, in the SharePoint installation process. Unfortunately, that doesn't include the licensing. So you can now install SharePoint Server as part of your SharePoint deployment process, but you still need to license Project Server independently. As of, I think it was last May, was the last update I got on that. That could change. I'm anticipating that it won't. I'm anticipating that you will still need to license it separately, but the deployment process has been streamlined. Okay, Matter Center. I could do a webinar just on this particular topic. So because we, are running short on time, I'm going to kind of keep this brief. AcroWire's been Matter Center TAP partners since its inception and have tested that product extensively. Microsoft announced that they were open sourcing it at ILTACON this past year in Vegas. Well, we got our first taste of what that actually means in the last couple of weeks. They released the compiled binaries to us, and we deployed it. I'll give you some very candid feedback, is that there's still a long way to go with deployment, and we haven't seen the source code yet. So in order for Matter Center, a lot of people got really excited when Microsoft announced Matter Center because they weren't happy with, their DMS or the money that they were dumping into their DMS, and this looked like a way out. If you're in the AmLaw 200 or even NLJ 350 space, this is Ted's opinion here, but I don't think that Matter Center is going to be a viable replacement for your DMS. Products like iManage, eDocs, NetDocs, those are industrial-grade document management systems, and Matter Center uses SharePoint behind the scenes. SharePoint has some challenges with how it stores what they call blobs, binary long objects, which is how documents are stored in SharePoint. Making that scale to a law firm size payload where you have tens or even up to 100 million documents and multiple versions of those documents, having SharePoint handle that workload is going to be a bit of a challenge. Something else that's been confusing in the messaging, but I'm here to clear up, there are absolutely cloud dependencies. So if you go to the Matter Center site, it says that it supports certain on-prem and hybrid configurations. We've been working through that in detail, and there is no way to deploy Matter Center today in an on-prem only environment. You absolutely have some cloud dependencies there. Like I said, we could talk for a long time on Matter Center, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeff to talk about durable links.
Thanks, Ted. Yes. Just let me know that you can hear me. And a couple of things that are really noteworthy in SharePoint 2016 I'll be covering now. One is the durable links. If you've ever tried to collaborate outside your firm with documents that are in SharePoint, you know that you've got fairly ugly looking URLs that also change if you move or version a document. And that's been addressed through these durable links. They live on the Office Online server that Ted mentioned a minute ago. And then you can move a file, archive it, version it, and it still stays at exactly the same link. So especially for extranets, I see a lot of firms provisioning extranets and providing guest access, and this is a real boon. Along with 2016, there's also a number of user interface improvements, and they include really minor tweaks to the look and feel. So if you've done styling in SharePoint 2013, you won't have a big disruption. They also include a bunch of features that are usability, accessibility, style features. One being previews within document libraries. And these out-of-the-box previews were added in SharePoint 2013 within the Search Center. They're quite popular, and now they're accessible within document libraries so that people who are browsing can quickly and visually see, oh yeah, that's what's in there. There's a new mobile experience, which is essentially a view of a document library or list that goes full screen on a mobile device and is designed for that sort of what I call a one thumb, one eyeball experience. So that without a lot of customization, your SharePoint applications and sites will work from mobile devices much better than they've done in the past. It's not a fully responsive or highly designed mobile experience, so it doesn't do everything, but it's a big step forward. The other two notable things in the user experience have to do with sharing, where it's much easier to right-click and say, share this with this person. Again, for collaboration outside the firm, those controls are specifically made to both be compliant and auditable, and also easy. And rather than everything needing to go to the ribbon, you can right-click on a list or a library and do pretty much all the basic actions right from there. So that's a much quicker and easier experience. Along with that, there's accessibility features that show a lot of attention that's been put really into sort of the fine points of the SharePoint user interface. So that's a quick sense of the user interface and of the deployment and min-roll features. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about hybrid, because hybrid is a huge theme and probably the primary focus of the SharePoint 2016 release. And when I say hybrid, I mean hybrid between on-prem and the cloud. Maybe we can bring up a poll for just a second to see where folks in the audience are on whether or not they'll do cloud adoption in the future.
And Jeff, while folks are filling out that poll there, I just wanted to kind of make note of a phenomenon that I've seen over the past several years at Ilticon. You know, when we've been Office 365 partners for a number of years, and you know, when when SharePoint Online would be discussed, let's say at ILTACON 2013, it was a, 5%, 1 out of every 20, would engage in that dialogue, and 19 wouldn't. The following year, 2014, it began to balance out a little bit, where I'd say about half the folks that were interested in that path. And this past year, I would say that the majority of folks that we talked to, and not just at small law firms in the AmLaw 200 space, the majority were interested and had plans to incorporate some sort of hybrid component into their infrastructure, whether it be moving their My Sites out to SharePoint Online or an extranet. Those are very good use cases, and I just wanted to kind of make note of that I've really seen an uptick in interest in the SharePoint Online space, and we're doing one AmLaw 50 migration right now. So the big law firms are doing it, and I think that the pendulum has kind of swung in the other direction, or beginning to swing in that direction.
Yes, absolutely. And I see from the poll results, I think the audience can also see, something like 20% or nearly a quarter of folks in the audience now are either already using Office 365 or have it in their plans, as opposed to looking at and working with it. So we've reached a significantly different point, and I'll say with other verticals that I work with, BA Insight works a lot with legal, but is also active in other domains. Government, ProServe is, most of our customers there already have a footprint into the cloud. And even financial services and pharma are starting to work that way. So this is, for the next couple of topics, this is important because Microsoft's push is very much to the cloud. And the 2016 release is not only, quote unquote, born in the cloud, meaning that the SharePoint Online code, as Ted mentioned, has been used as the basis for the on-prem version, but there are a lot of experiences which are cloud first or cloud only. So anything that's listed on this slide is something that's not available in an on-prem version. OneDrive for file sync and share, Yammer as a social collaboration, video. I'll be talking about eDiscovery and Delve in a little bit. And then Power BI, which is a very nice sort of analytics capability. These are all cloud only from Microsoft. And the recognition that these are neat, but many organizations are just starting to put their toe in the water is what led to a hybrid theme in SharePoint 2016. The first element of that, and really the only element that's been backported to SharePoint 2013, is a new search capability called Cloud Hybrid Search. And at a high level, what this is doing is taking content that is from on-prem and in the cloud and creating a single unified search index that lives in the cloud. And there's a lot of hybrid capabilities in both Exchange and SharePoint with 2016 that are based on search and use this same facility. What that means is that the index is something that you no longer have to use server footprint for. If you are a medium-sized farm, you can drop from 14 servers to 3. If you're a large-sized farm, you may be dropping from 41 servers to 5, because search, especially as it scales, is probably the largest and most resource-intensive of the workloads. It also means that if you have a little bit of content or a lot of content in the blue part here in the cloud, either in OneDrive, which is cloud only, or in SharePoint Online, you can access that alongside the SharePoint content. So a common scenario is to provision an extranet in Office 365 so that you don't have to worry about your firewalls or traffic that has to go to your data center for that extranet, but leave high business impact content firmly in your data center. Cloud Hybrid Search also now opens up the possibility of bringing in external content, and that requires connectors, which, for example, connectors to your document management system, eDocs or iManage, lets you have a single unified view of things no matter where they live, and sort of play it where it lies. Built off of the same index in Office 365 is a thing called the Office Graph. And we'll be talking about this in a ILTA webinar tomorrow if you want to know more about it, but the Office Graph and Delve are a very nice new discovery capability. So the experience with hybrid search is now a single unified view across things that are on-prem and online. And through the use of connectors, for example, BA Insight makes connectors to 55 some odd systems that include iManage, Elite, Documentum, eDocs, etc., so that everything can show up together in that unified index. It also can be brought into a common information architecture through tagging, auto-tagging, and metadata generation, and shown in applications such as matter comparison is an application that BA Insight makes for pricing and proposal generation. Look at different projects and all of the information and metrics around them together in one view, and then automatically work from there. The connectors that I mentioned, you can see on this list here. This has been personally my focus for the last 5 years, connectors, auto-classification applications. And these are now all things that can work in a hybrid environment and feed this hybrid cloud search. These are really well proven and quite popular on-prem. And the difference is that with the SharePoint 2016 release, you can start using these in online experiences like Delve. And this is a view of what that looks like. Again, I encourage you to either attend or listen afterwards to our webinar on the subject tomorrow. The same features that are used to provide hybrid capabilities to Yammer, which are largely linking, are now available for conversations around documents. So you now have a new option for commentary, collaboration about documents or document sets so that you don't have to open things up and read comments inside and attach them to the document. They're really a thread that goes alongside, and that's a pretty neat feature. There's also a number of other hybrid elements. You can follow people, groups, documents that may be on a site on your extranet in the cloud and follow it from on-prem. You can provide metadata that's consistent between on-prem and online, et cetera. And there's a built-in hybrid configuration tool that runs off of Office 365. So big theme of SharePoint 2016 around hybrid and enabling the cloud experiences. The other big theme is in compliance. Specifically, the Compliance Center and data loss prevention, which you can use today in the cloud, have been brought on-prem, both in Exchange and SharePoint. And rights management, digital rights management, DRM, is available as well with SharePoint 2016. All of these things make it much easier for you as an IT group to manage compliance and potentially to help your clients with their information and their own challenges. This is what the Data Loss Prevention Center looks like. Much like the Health Analyzer doesn't actually analyze health, data loss prevention doesn't actually prevent data loss. It detects it. But you can quite easily set up a pattern looking for credit card information, private information, or any kind of pattern around particular litigants or areas of law, and make that a policy, use it on-prem by itself, or have the same policy is then broadcast so that you write it once and it works on SharePoint and Exchange, online and on-prem. And then from that detection, you can put that content on hold, get an audit report, or go into eDiscovery. And this is what the patterns look like. They're all search-driven, so that there's a sensitive type of credit card number or social security number. There's about 30 of these sensitive types built in, or you can make your own, that are pretty smart about recognizing that the word MasterCard and something that looks like a credit card number with a date, that's very likely a credit card, whereas a simple credit card format number might be a part number or a case number. And as I mentioned, you can take information that's detected and treat it in a variety of ways. That includes using eDiscovery. Now, eDiscovery was introduced really in SharePoint 2007, but I frankly say that it was a joke in 2007, and very few people used it in 2010 simply because it wasn't adequate for the job. It was beefed up in 2013 and majorly beefed up in this release in 2016, so that compliance with things like FRCP, you get a subpoena and you have to, within a specific time, serve up all of the electronic records that might be relevant. It's worth taking a look at the facilities that are now built into the Microsoft stack. there's a new pretty powerful discovery service which is only available in the cloud. This was an acquisition of a company called Equivio that used predictive analytics and predictive coding to reduce legal review time. If you are interested in more information about eDiscovery, you can just drop me a line because this is a pretty sophisticated area, but the integration of Equivio seems to like it's going pretty well. There's a preview program that's been going for about 2 months now that we're participating in, and looks like the integration is pretty strong. So we've talked about the user interface features, about hybrid, and about compliance. I'm going to turn it back to Ted to talk about the sort of the ratings, bits and bytes, and requirements.
Thanks, Jeff. So good news here, with every release of SharePoint, there has been a pretty significant uptick in resource requirements. For anybody who's been responsible for allocating infrastructure resources to their SharePoint farm, they know this well. The good news is that not much has changed in terms of hardware requirements. On the flip side, there are some new OS and database server requirements that you need to be aware of. You're going to need, on the OS side, Server 2012 R2 or up, and on the database server side, you're going to need SQL 2014 SP1 or SQL Server 2016. So just a few things to be aware of there. Patching has been a huge challenge, not just for law firms, but even for Microsoft themselves as they deployed Office 365 in a multi-tenant scenario. In the past, you had to schedule maintenance windows to install SharePoint CUs and service packs. We have not had a chance to kick the tires on this because the product hasn't been released, let alone update. So what we've been told is, what I'm going to kind of communicate here. The number of MSIs and MSPs have been dramatically reduced. So you'll have 4, and then 1 MSI, 3 MSPs, and then I believe it's an additional MSP for every language pack that you have installed. So that footprint has been drastically reduced, and you're no longer required to schedule maintenance windows and bring the environment down. That's a big plus. A few additional changes to make note of. I'm going to just kind of hit the highlights here. InfoPath 2013, the demise of InfoPath has been well documented, and InfoPath will continue to be supported, but there's not a new desktop version of the InfoPath client. So any existing investments that you've made in InfoPath are going to be just fine. We get asked all the time, what should we do, for things that we would normally do in InfoPath on the workflow and forms front, and frankly, until Microsoft clarifies the direction, there are some third-party tools like K2 and Nintex that you may want to evaluate. There's also some things that you can do with Access Services, but Microsoft has let us know a while back that InfoPath is going to die a slow death. Something else that was, I think, caught some people off guard was that there's no 2016 version of SharePoint Designer. The 2013 version of SharePoint Designer will work in 2016, and there's a separate installation package. You don't have to install all of Office 2013 if you've already migrated to Office 2016. There's a separate installation for just SharePoint Designer. And one of the things that we alluded to earlier in the beginning of the presentation is the upgrade path. So if you're on 2010 today, there's not an upgrade path to 2016 directly. You need to upgrade to 2013 and then to 2016. However, you're still able to migrate. So if you're in 2010 and you want to skip 2013 altogether, it's a migration scenario. There's plenty of great tools out there, you know, Metalogix, ShareGate. There's plenty of tools that help automate that migration, but there's no in-place upgrade like there has been between some versions of SharePoint in the past. Okay, and then finally, I just wanted to mention SharePoint MD. So that's a service offering that AcroWire provides. It's a $2,500 fee. We come in and evaluate the health of your SharePoint farm. We also partner with BA Insight, where they can come in and evaluate how you're using search. We've deployed this at a number of law firms and uncovered very critical issues that are likely to cause problems. If you're interested in this, it's a great way for us to kind of get to know each other. Obviously, we're not paying the bills on this size of engagement, but it's a good way for us to get to know you and you to get to know us. So it's a good starting point. And that really concludes the presentation. We got to a little bit of a late start, but Gail, do we have any questions that the audience has submitted? You might be on mute, Gail.
If you are in the audience and you'd like to ask a question, don't hesitate.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was on mute and I couldn't unmute myself. I think it was all the issues that we're having. I apologize once again for all the technical issues. Thank you, Jeff and Ted. All right, if you have any questions, go ahead and utilize the Adobe Connect Q&A box. And while we wait for questions, I'd like to mention that a copy of the PowerPoint document and a link to the recording will be posted to our website in a few days. After this presentation, you will receive a request for you to evaluate today's webinar. Take a few minutes to provide us your feedback, and these evaluations help us to continue to provide educational content. All right, as of right now, I don't see any questions out in the Q&A box. We'll give it a few more seconds. Okay. Ted, Jeff, anything else you want to close with? Oh, wait, we have one.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and take this one, Jeff?
Sure.
Okay.
So there's a question that says, you mentioned scalability problems at 10 to 100 million documents, and can you elaborate? I think this really came from Ted's description around the Matter Center and the way the Matter Center works and whether it's really ready for larger firms. The sort of routing and storage elements in SharePoint, I think are not the issue, and I certainly have seen plenty of SharePoint farms that are at 10 to 100 million documents. In fact, our largest customer is probably about 900 million documents. It's more about the navigation around them. So, for example, the list view, which has been 5,000 elements in 2013, that looks like it will be increased to around 20,000, although really it's behind the scenes and it's just there. It's just using smart indexing to get around it. That's an example when you have a lot of documents. Being able to get at views of them is either very slow or very difficult. When you have that many documents in an active, managed environment, you tend to have a lot of workflows, you tend to have a lot of elements around it. So I think that there's not an intrinsic scale problem with SharePoint getting to 100 million documents. There is an issue with using a 100 million document DM application in SharePoint without any add-ons. Any other questions?
Okay.
Most common.
I think we're...
Good. I think we're set.
Go ahead, Jeff. No, go ahead.
I was going to toss one in that I got actually from a side view. That the most common question I get from firms when we have gone through the 2016 element comes back to the beginning. It's how hard is the upgrade and what do I get for it? When should I plan to do this? And I'll second Ted's sense that this will probably be an easier initial release. We've now gone through, half a dozen upgrades to both single step from 2013 and two step from 2010 relatively cleanly, but I'd still, so I would no longer say definitely wait for an SP1, but there'll be a monthly update. So I would say if you have been waiting for an SP1 in the past, wait for a few monthly updates and keep your finger on it before you jump in.
Okay, well, once again, thank you, Ted and Jeff, for your presentation. And to our members, please keep an eye on our website, www.iltanet.org, under the meeting tabs for upcoming webinars and meeting info. We look forward to seeing you in future webinars. And remember, as ILTA's Executive Director, Randy Mays, always says, tell a friend about ILTA. Thanks, everyone.